So, hi everybody. I'm Nick. I'm Chief Product Officer and founder and board member. Spent about 17 years so far working in high growth tech. And I've become extremely interested in North Star metrics as a way to create unprecedented alignment within teams. And that's what today is all about, North Star metrics. So I've been doing this over the last couple of years with startups of all sizes, companies like Rain, high growth Fintech, Site Improved, Analytics, VowieBox, and then with startups at the smaller end of the spectrum and with a bunch of investors as well. What I try to do is write down a lot of the things that I think I've learned over the years, and you can find that on my website if that becomes of interest. So why am I here? That's always an important question to start with. Why am I passionate about this? So back in 2007, 2008, this was what the data looked like in my startup. We were building a developer platform. So we were building APIs that we use by developers. And take a moment to look at this. This is what the data looked like. So absorb that for me. Now, I want you to grab the chat here in Zoom, right? And tell me in chat, how do developers behave when they love a product? What behavioral traits do you see in analytics? Or how would you expect a developer to behave when they love a product? So drop that in. What do you think? Use it everywhere, as many systems as possible. Yeah, use it, build on it, make API requests. Yeah. What else? How do your developers use it? Embed it in everyday work. They go the extra mile. So some of the behaviors you'd want to see. Yeah. So this is what I started to see in my analytics, right? I started to see that one of these features was being used, but the others weren't being used. And to me, because I was a developer at this point, that was really counterintuitive, because when I saw a cool API, a cool SDK that I liked, I wouldn't just use one function of it. I would use all of it. And I would be, like you guys say, I'd be hitting it regularly, frequently, but there'd be a lot of breadth to it. And breadth of use is a key part of the value of a developer platform. You can't build a developer platform and just have people use one feature. You're using Windows, you're using iOS, you're using any of the developer platforms, you're using lots of features. So I saw this and it bothered me, and I didn't really know how to articulate the bother. And I brought up this graph in a board meeting in 2008. And I was told by the board, a board member, that I was being overly negative and pessimistic and everything was fine and I should just, deal with it and move on. Everything wasn't okay. Everything wasn't fine. This was a leading indicator. This was the canary in the coal mine. And this, taught me a very, very valuable lesson. It taught me that what I needed to do was find a measure that told me how would people behave if they really loved my product, not if they just liked it, not if they were just trying it out. And then I would obsess about delivering on that metric, how people loved if they behaved my product. And that's really carried me forward today. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. So what I have found over time is that most teams and startups tend to do this. They have an idea for something they want to build, something they want to try. They do it and they measure the results. And we call that experimenting. But that's not what experimentation is. And that's not what the high-performing teams are doing. The most successful teams I come across have this behavior. They decide what impact they want to have, and they identify the metrics to drive those results. So back in 2007, I had an idea for building a developer platform. I built it, I tried some stuff, and I measured the results. Now, had I really taken the opposite approach here, and had I said, okay, the impact I want to have is I want to have developers using at least 10 features each to demonstrate breadth, and then had I set about making that happen, I would have been way more successful. And this behavioral pattern, this difference between doing stuff and measuring on the one hand, and on the other hand, deciding what impact you want to have, deciding what you're going to measure, and then pushing those KPIs, that's a big difference that I see all over the place between mediocrity and success. So I'm going to take you through a whistle-stop tour of this today. It's going to be fast. We're going to talk about the wrong way to use metrics. We're going to talk about the founders' problems that North Star metrics solve. We're going to talk about what a North Star metric is, good and bad examples of metrics, why it's a bad idea to copy big tech, a simple formula for setting your North Star. So you're going to come out of this knowing how to set a North Star with your team. We're going to talk about how to get your team using your North Star, what comes after your North Star, and how to make OKRs and North Stars play nicely together. Ready to go? Let's go. So I'm going to launch a quick poll. Do you have a North Star metric today? Just give me a quick idea to this. Okay, fantastic. We've got some great response. Come in quick if anyone's got any more questions. I'm going to share this. I'm going to end and share results. Okay, so we should all be able to see the results there. So, okay, most of us, very few of us are happy with the North Star metric. You should drop, if you're happy in your North Star metric in chat, drop me a note at the end of this and tell me if you're still happy with it. And a lot of us either don't have or we're dissatisfied with our North Star metric. No surprise there. That's great to know. That helps me direct this content more. Feel free, by the way, I know one of the roles that I do here is giving some of you ammunition to work with your CEOs or partners you work with to convince them why. Feel free to take screenshots of the polls if it's good ammunition to convince the people you work with to adopt a North Star. Okay, so problems North Stars solve. So this is what I have heard from founders I've worked with. They come in and they're telling me things, and these are real quotes. We kept considering different things, having a lot of conversations, but not making decisions. Sure, that's familiar. Analysis paralysis. We were swirling, not making decisions, stopping experiments before we got results. We needed to nail our customer value prop to drive up conversions. We had a big vision, but we didn't know how to define the next steps. Our leadership team was struggling to communicate our vision to the team. All decision-making with the CPO, product teams were not taking decisions. So this is a pretty good example of a set of problems that I've come to call lack of alignment in the team. This is one of the core problems that getting a good North Star metric in place will solve. It's a breakthrough way of generating alignment in your teams. Now, associated with a lack of alignment are low customer value creation. It is very hard to create a product that delights customers if people in the teams are anything other than 100% aligned behind the same direction of travel. Lack of alignment creates very slow decision-making, which leads to slow growth. Because in a startup, it's all about how quickly we learn and how quickly we make decisions, what experiments we're running, what value prop are we targeting, how quickly we're pushing this out. The quicker we do those things, the faster we make progress, the faster we learn, the faster we grow. And the big one here is founders being stuck in the weeds, feeling like I just can't, I really need to do some strategic planning. I need to do some big picture thinking. I need to think about where we're going next. I need time to look at the next release. But all I do is spend every day from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. in calls, explaining things over and over to my team. The typical one here is founders saying, I've just explained the same thing 5 times to 5 different people and they still don't get it. So that feeling of frustration, like you're not getting your message across, that comes from a lack of alignment. That comes from having people seeing things a different way. I'm going to show you how to solve that with the North Star metric. So the acid test for me is that a good North Star metric, choosing and using one the right way, aligns your team behind a well-quantified, customer-centric vision of success that leads to faster growth, maximizes customer delight, and lets you as the founder focus on the bigger picture. So this is the expectations you should have in setting a North Star. This is what you should be getting: growth, customer delight, and more time to focus on the bigger picture. Sound good? I'm sure that sounds amazing. Who doesn't want growth? Who doesn't want happy customers? Who doesn't want more time to focus on the bigger picture? Let's see how you do it. So the first thing I'm going to do is ask you to rate these North Stars. So I've put up here a few different things that you could be working on. I'd love to get an idea of how important these are to you today. So take your time. We'll take about a minute on this. Cool. Seeing some results come through. Thank you, everybody. Let it run for a minute or so more, because I know there's still some people going. Try wrap up in the next few seconds if you're going. Give me a gut feel. Okay, I'm going to let it tick on a little bit more. Okay, I'm going to end it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's see what we got there. So we see, unsurprisingly, team alignment, super important. Team alignment, kind of urgent. So this is a really nice way of getting a good handle on the priorities that exist. How important are they? How urgent are they? So again, feel free to screenshot this if that is of use to you. This is going to help me really zoom into alignment, a little bit on product market fit, and a little bit on focus. Okay, thanks everybody. So this is my formula for a North Star metric. This is how it works, right? You're trying to achieve your business goals. So there are things your business is trying to achieve. Delighting customers, hitting specific growth targets, raising a funding round, expanding into new geographies. They're business goals, and they're super important. That's kind of the raison d'etre of a business to achieve its goals. Your North Star metric is something that directs you towards those goals, but it isn't the goals per se. And I'm going to deep dive on this later. I'm going to talk about why ARR isn't a good North Star metric, why monthly actives isn't a good North Star metric, why CAC is a terrible North Star metric. But take it for now. Your North Star metric directs you to your goals, and it answers 3 questions. Firstly, it tells you how your users would behave if they really loved your product. And this is the single most important thing about a North Star metric. How would my users behave? Not how would they think, not how would they talk, not what NPS score they would give, but what behaviors would we be able to see, track, and influence in our product that would show that they really, really loved it. The next thing it does is focus your whole organization on the next big milestone. So the North Star isn't 5 or 10 years out, and it's not what we got to do this quarter. You're the founder, you're the CEO, you're the leader. You define what that next milestone is. For some companies, that's a 12-month funding horizon. For other companies, it's a 36-month mission. But there's this big milestone that you're trying to get to. If you don't have that big milestone defined, that's a great way to build alignment and motivation in your team. The North Star focuses your organization on what that milestone is. Finally, the North Star metric is memorable and inspiring to the whole team. So it's got to be something that people can remember, but it also doesn't have to be something that is instantly understandable. And I see a lot of teams go wrong on this. That a criticism of the North Star metric might be, well, it's not immediately obvious what it is. It doesn't need to be immediately obvious. This isn't for your customers. This isn't going on a landing page. This isn't copy that needs to be comprehension tested. This is something that we're going to drill into every one of your employees at every single stand-up every day and at every weekly all hands. So we don't want this to be something completely obscure and bizarre, but we do want it to be custom to your business, something that really speaks to where your business is going. So we're going to spend a bit of time on these 3 different criteria today. Before that, I'm going to show you some examples of North Star metrics to make this very, very pragmatic. So this is the North Star that we set at my previous startup, CloudMade. We decided that, and this was a sales-led B2B. So I get a lot of questions, difference between product-led, difference between sales-led. To me, there isn't a huge difference between product-led and sales-led because every North Star metric needs to specifically answer how would your customers behave if they love the product and what is this next big milestone that we're going towards. So at this point at CloudMade, we were building this product that was here, but it was going to take us years to get this into consumers' hands, into the end users' hands. So we needed to delight the buyer. The most important customer was the buyer. So we set this metric of demo to first meeting conversion. This acted as a lightning rod and just catalyzed all of our product activities. Shortly after that, a few years ago, I worked with a friend, the CEO of this company, Gaia GPS, which is an outdoor hiking app, to set their North Star metric. Now, they had just been acquired. So this was set in the lead up to acquisition. Often when companies are bought, the management team of the company is just sold is expected to deliver on revenue results. One of the main reasons companies buy other companies. And it was exactly the case here. Gaia needed to deliver serious revenue growth in 2021. So we could have set the North Star metric to be revenue. We could have said it's MRR, it's subscribers, right? But we didn't, because we knew, in the, between all of us, we really knew that the measure of quality of the product, you couldn't measure the quality of the product by revenue. It had to be measured by the retained users. Are we getting the same people coming back month after month after month? For every hike they go on, are they using us? So what we did here was take a very, very little leap of faith, a leap of faith saying that if we can get people to come back month after month after month, then they love our product and they're going to pay for it, and our revenue growth is going to go up. And this worked fantastically well. Next, the North Star metric I've just finished setting with the team, which is one of my favorite that we've ever done, was for a DTC brand. So this is a brand selling not sofas as is shown here, but selling another direct consumer product. And it's a physical product. So it's, simple selling a physical product, but part of their strategy is creating a digital element. And they wanted people to be coming back and engaging with their digital experiences. So we went around the houses. What could the North Star be? Should it be very growth focused? Because, a direct consumer business is all about growth. What we settled on was digitally returning customers. So how many of our customers who buy our physical product then return digitally? So start to let that one drip through your minds, because I'm going to deep dive on it a little bit later. That created an immense focus within the team. They knew that, selling the physical product was important, but it was only success when we sell the physical product and that leads somebody into our digital product. So this had a massive focusing effect on this team. Next up, I put this in because often people think transactions isn't a good North Star metrics. It's very transactional. This is a great example of why for every time you're setting a North Star metric, you have to think really clearly about what it is you want to get out of it and how your users will behave if they loved your product. In product-led B2B Fintech, like this one was, the number of transactions the product was running was a fantastic example of customer love. The better the product, the more people wanted to transact with it. That worked very well for this product. For others, transactions may be completely the wrong thing to set. So don't get misled, don't get taken down the wrong path by looking at the specific North Star. We got to think about it in the context of what we're trying to achieve. Okay, I'm going to deep dive into these examples in just 1 second. Before we do that, I want to get your opinion on what you think makes some good North Stars. So 3 options: monthly actives, ARR, retained users. How do you rate these? Nearly there. I'll give you maybe 10 more seconds. Make your quick gut feel choice. Wow, this is fun. It's diving all over the place, the data coming in. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so what have we got? MAUs, okay. Yeah, I'll see if I can convince you otherwise. ARR, okay. Okay to great. Interesting, cool. So there's 12 people. I hope to convert you by the end of this to not it being displeased with ARR as a North Star. And retained users, cool. So we're all pretty product centric because we think retained users is probably a good one. Awesome. So this is just a bit of fun, right? But there's a lot to be learned from these answers. So let me dive through into a bit more detail on these metrics. So these are the North Stars that I've set with companies over the last couple of years. And I'm going to take them through my 3 litmus tests. Do they answer the question, how would my users behave if they love my product? Does it focus my whole organization on the next big milestone? Is it memorable and inspiring to my whole team? So the first one, demo to first meeting conversion. Yeah, that's how users would behave if they love my product. It's going to focus my whole team on the next big milestone, and it's memorable and inspiring. Retained users, same thing, right? And if you look at the context here, B2C app, post product market fit, just acquired. This definitely tells us that users love our product. Retention is a fantastic love metric. You only come back again and again to a product if you really love it. Does it focus my whole organization on the next big milestone? Yeah, it does. Is it memorable and inspiring? Yes. So this is the way you've got to run through things. We're putting together our North Star metrics. Keep asking yourselves these 3 questions. How would they behave if they love the product? Does it focus us on the next big milestone? Is it memorable and inspiring to my whole team? Detail is good. So when we're trying to build things that are memorable and inspiring, being detailed, being specific is super important. And that's what we got to with this company with digitally returning customers. We had to break down each of those components, each of the concepts, and start to explain them. So we had digital. What does digital mean? What is a digital customer? Returning. What did returning mean? How do we define returning? And getting into this level of detail is incredibly important. Really understanding what are your analytics showing you. So returning, does this simply mean that someone we think is this customer hits any part of our website? Does it mean there's a certain dwell time? Are there some actions they need to take? And often this level of detail is missed out. This is incredibly important to be able to get very precise. This is what we believe digital means, returning means, and in this case, customer means. So we were able to define precisely a customer is not somebody who spends this much money, there's someone who spends this much money. And this is where a huge amount of the power and leverage you get with the North Star metric comes in, from being able to precisely set what you mean by your terminology. So don't be tempted to go for the sort of generic North Stars that you read all about. Make sure you find one that's really your own. Speaking of generic things, I asked ChatGPT what it thought. I'm quite a big fan of ChatGPT. I don't want to pick on it, but on this occasion, I don't really agree with it. So ChatGPT told me that its examples of the best North Star metrics for startups would be MRR, active users, customer acquisition cost, NPS, and average order value. Made me feel a little bit like this. ChatGPT needs to come to one of my sessions. I'm going to run through why I think these are seriously bad North Star metrics to choose in a bit of detail now, because I think it's done a great job of showing the status quo here. So what does ChatGPT think? How do I rate it? So firstly, for MRR, right? MRR is a pretty popular North Star metric, and it kind of comes because obviously revenue is very important and we all want to be sales driven, and lots of our boards are very sales focused, and there's a lot of sales focused metrics. And then CEOs get very worried that product teams don't understand their sales and are not enthused by it. And so we set MRR and we keep telling people MRR is the goal. And then we somehow expect the product teams and the engineers to kind of connect the dots between the two. It doesn't work. Not only that, if you focus too much on a financial metric, especially at an early stage, you get the Groupon effect. What's the Groupon effect? This is the Groupon effect. You remember Groupon, where you used to come to buy discounts in restaurants? The problem with Groupon was the business model sucked for both sides of the marketplace. If you were a restaurant offering discounts, you just felt peeved that you'd spent 20 to 25% of your revenue to acquire a customer who wasn't going to come back to your restaurant. So they used to put you in the sort of dark spaces at the edge of the restaurant, and you get a second-rate service. If you were a user of Groupon looking out for a deal, you would be upset that you were put in the dark corners of the restaurant and given bad service. And this caused Groupon's stickiness to be very poor. Their retention was very bad. They couldn't retain merchants. They couldn't retain users. There was no customer loyalty. There was no product quality. They did a reasonable job of IPOing at one point. They famously turned down a very big offer of acquisition from Google before that. But if you look at how their market valuation has absolutely tanked since then, this is not the kind of company that I want to build. It's not the kind of company I think many of us want to build in tech. We want to build lasting value, not things that act as a rocket ship and then crash again afterwards. So beware of the Groupon effect, and maybe talk to your CEOs if they're very keen on MRR about the Groupon effect. Specifically, what this means is that if we over-index on revenue and we're successful, we will deliver revenue. But the point of over-indexing, the point of focusing, is that you over-focus on something. You say, this is the one thing we're going to really learn how to nail. If you learn how to nail revenue, you will learn how to nail revenue at the expense of customer delight. And customer delight is what builds revenue. Finally, the one of the motivations CEOs have for setting revenue as North Star metrics is to get developers engaged in the business, get them inspired by the business. And I get that. I want to do that as well with my development team. But if you think developers are excited by MRR, you've got to spend more time hanging out with them and talking to them, because they're not. What they're excited by is building products that get into people's hands, that change behaviors, that are used, that excite people. And it's your job as the leader to connect the dots between what your team are doing, the pixels they're putting on the screen, the lines of code they're creating, the customer behaviors, and the business impact, right? And that's one of the things the North Star metric lets you tease apart. Next up is WOWs, MAUs, monthly actives, weekly actives. And this is the Facebook effect, right? Because CEOs say, oh, but we should have monthly actives as our North Star metric because Facebook has it as theirs. So word of warning on that one. Facebook did not have monthly active users as their North Star metric when they were growing, when they were doing cool things, when they're in their growth phase. They had an activation metric, which was the percentage of users who've added 10 new contacts in 7 days. That was their North Star metric, an activation metric. The percentage of all of our new users this month who we managed to get to add 10 connections in the first 7 days. Because they'd done data analysis, if you believe one story, or they just made it up if you believe another story, that told them that people who carried out that behavior, adding 10 friends in 7 days, they were going to love the product. And that was their North Star metric. They shifted to MAUs later when all the hard work was done and they just needed to crank up the advertising engine. But let's look under the surface of MAUs, right? Because you could argue that, well, weekly active teams work for Slack, so maybe MAUs can work for us. The problem with MAUs is monthly actives, weekly actives, whatever it is, there's an iceberg effect going on here where you have no idea what's going on under the surface, right? So this top line is a stack of my total monthly actives. Let's say it's 10,000. And if things look not great, but not terrible here, right? Because at least it's not going down and the economy's bad and it's been a bit of a rough time and so on. We're doing okay. Maybe you can report that to the board and the board will believe it and you'll get another quarter before they kind of... However, you look at what's going on under the surface here and all of the metrics we should think about are looking really bad. We're not really activating users. So we're not moving new users through an activation point to get them hooked. And our engaged users are dropping off. Users, they do not like our product. In the meantime, the new or pre-activated, we'll be paying more and more and more in customer acquisition costs to generate those. So customer acquisition cost is like the inverse impact of retention. If you retain your customers very well, you're going to have a lower customer acquisition cost and higher lifetime value. This graph is one, if your CEO is keen or you're keen on MAUs, really think about this. Think about, is there a better metric such as retained users that you could be going for? NPS, which was another one of ChatGPT's suggestions, it's a harder one because I love NPS. I use it a lot myself. I think it's a super tough metric, which is why I like it. It's very easy to skew. It skews negatively very quickly, which is great. But the problem with NPS is it's not a behavior. It's an opinion. And you can't build high growth, highly scalable tech businesses based on opinion. We need to understand what are the behaviors that are repeatable, that are scalable, that we can identify and then scale up. So not super keen on NPS as a North Star. It's a great balance metric to take. It can be a very powerful proxy metric for certain products, but does not work as a North Star metric. Where you can get a little bit of inspiration from, but use with caution, is what big tech do. Now, I'm going to show you some examples of big tech because everyone always wants to see them. But these are companies that are massively scaled up with tens to hundreds of different independent squads. Now, all of the CPOs of these level companies that I've talked to tell me that once you're at that level of scale, once you're like at 20 to hundreds of squads, the company North Star metric becomes a lot less relevant and motivating to the team. And it's really about the individual tribe or squad metrics that can become more important. So often these North Star metrics become something that is advertising the company, but is not actually driving it anymore. Nonetheless, I'm going to show and I'm going to talk through them a bit with you. So Spotify, let's start with that. Time spent listening. How would users behave if they love their product? Yeah, this is a good North Star metric, right? Because if I love Spotify, which I do, I will spend more and more time inside it. Is it going to focus me on the next big milestone? Well, it doesn't tell us that because we don't know what their milestone is. And like I was saying, the reality is when you're that size, there are lots of independent milestones that are being moved. So you can't be successful as a startup by emulating everything that Spotify does. What we could do is look at what they did when they were 50, 100 people, but it's very hard to get truthful data on those types of situations. Airbnb, number of nights booked, again, a nice quality metric that should increment with quality of the product. Zoom, weekly hosted meetings, yeah, increments with product quality. HubSpot, weekly active teams. Yeah, this is a nice one because often when you have network effect products like this, there's a critical mass in place. So Slack saw this with Slack, that they didn't count a customer as being a customer until they had something like 5 connections inside it, because they knew that once you had 5 people, that's when the network would start to take off. So I would look very carefully if you're doing this at what the definition of a team is in your definition. So I wouldn't go for any of these personally. I think there's potential that they could work for my product, but I would not be overly inspired by big tech. Let's look at some of the killer mistakes that I see people making time and time again. These are ones to avoid. And I'm going to do a little quiz after this. So the first big mistake is setting a commercial goal, not a behavior. Having ARR, having something that's so abstracted that it doesn't act as a rallying point. It doesn't focus us all on that one behavior we're trying to move. The next is being generic. When you're generic, you miss the opportunity to really inspire your team. You miss the opportunity to make the North Star metric part of your strategy. And that happens a lot. The next one is the team not adopting the North Star. So this really needs thinking through. So the North Star isn't something the CEO comes up with on his or her, afternoon off or at the weekend. And it shouldn't really be something that the 2 co-founders come up with on their own at an offsite. A good North Star metric involves input from all of the team. The reason for that being, you need people to buy into this. You need people to believe it. We need people that need to become part of the fabric of the company. So getting people's inputs into it throughout the whole process is the best way I've ever come across to get people to adopt one. Doesn't mean you put it up for a vote. It doesn't mean that the latest person to join your team gets to choose the North Star. But it means there are some very good ways, I'm going to share a bit later, techniques to get people's involvement up front. It gets them far more engaged and bought in. Next, which also confuses founders, the North Star metric can't be visionary and far out. This is not like where we're going in 5 years' time, right? This isn't the vision. If you're Elon Musk, the North Star isn't, how many people do we have living on Mars? It's where do we need to get to Mars? What are those behaviors? And finally, a lack of second order / proxy metrics. So often a CEO will do a good job of setting a North Star, and then they just kind of leave it up to the individual teams to know what metrics to get out of Mixpanel. But then we're back to the very first problem I described. Then that's just saying, let's do some stuff and measure it afterwards. We want to have a North Star, and then we want to have our 2 or 3 key proxy metrics that are predictive of that North Star. That's what I mean by second order metrics. So anyone who's brave enough, I hope we all are, which of these mistakes are we making today? Okay, 16 people, gonna let it run a little bit more. Okay, cool, more answers coming in. I'm gonna do 5 seconds, then shut it down. All right, let's take a look at this. So number 1 is commercial, not behavioral. That's pretty common. And then a pretty equal split here. Yeah. Team not being bought in, that's interesting. That's a shame, right? That you go through the effort of putting together a North Star metric, but then the team just don't adopt it. I'll try and share some tactics on how to stop that from happening later on. One of the key things there is just to get people talking about it the whole time. You can fix that one by every single stand up every day. What I want to know for the next 10 minutes, everyone, what did you do yesterday to increment the North Star? What are you going to do today to increment the North Star? And draw attention to and celebrate the people who are doing that. Too visionary, not relevant. Yeah, that's also a strange one. That took me a while to figure out myself. And lacking second order metrics, okay. Okay, let's look at a case study example here, and then we're going to go into Q&A pretty soon for some setting that I did with a very fun startup called Scooch, who are out of Founders Factory Accelerator here in London. And I worked with them over the course of 2 days to set their North Star metric. So the first thing that we did is get the right people in the room. So lots of startups are a little bit sloppy when it comes to this, to meetings. We all complain we have too many meetings, but we're not very buttoned up on how we decide who's in the meeting. So we spent quite a bit of time thinking, who did we want in this meeting? So we had the founder, we had the head of product, we had the head of growth, we had representatives from their investors. So we got all of the right people to be able to both contribute to and give inputs and also to help with the decision making. I've tried to give formulas for who needs to be in the room and it just doesn't work. You've just got to dedicate the time to thinking through who does need to be there and then getting them there. The next thing you've got to do is get clear on your business goals. You can't set a North Star unless you know where you're going, because it's the guiding light that guides you there. Once you've done that, so once you've got the right people, you're saying, okay, these are our goals. We're setting a 12-month time frame, and we need to move these key metrics in growth, these key ones in engagement, these key ones in monetization. That's what we need to do to raise our next round, or we need to expand into this geography. Once you know those goals, then you run a brainstorm. Really simple. You get everybody heads down with stickies, real ones are in Miro or FigJam. How would our users behave if they loved our product? And this only takes 15 minutes. You just run it through all the behaviors. They would come back, they would keep on going, they would pay more, they would tell their friends, brainstorm it all out. Then what you do, you start to cluster together into the different clusters, and you work through each one, you try and narrow it down, the top 5, the top 3, the top 2, the top 1. And each time you do that reduction exercise, ask my 3 questions. How would people behave if they loved our product? Is this something that gets us to our next milestone? Is this memorable and personal for our team? Once you've done that, we're only some of the way through. We now have a North Star metric. The next thing we do now is we come back to our team and we ask them what they can do to drive the North Star. And when I did this with a startup called Harper last year, when they took their North Star back to the team, it was incredible, because the team instantly, they interrupted the question. We're like, oh, I know what I could do. I could stop doing all this stuff over here, because actually that's not important. And then if we reorganize what we did here, we could get more growth there. So the response you're looking for here is your team to suddenly become catalyzed and focused and start to throw ideas of what they can do, what they can stop doing. So we go back to our team and we ask them, what can you do? What are your ideas, team, on what we can do to drive our North Star? You select the best ones, and that's what you focus on. Then you need to get your second order proxy growth metrics in place. This is a little bit too complex to go into now, but essentially what this is involved in doing is saying, what are the behaviors that which we believe are predictive of the North Star? So for example, with Gaia GPS that I showed you earlier on, their North Star was retained users. We want people returning, coming back month to month. So what do we know? Well, we know that users who download our maps tend to come back. We know that users who spend more than 15 minutes in their first session tend to come back. You identify these behaviors, then you create squads aligned behind driving those specific behaviors. Finally, as a founder, or as the chief product officer, or as the person who stepped up to lead this, it is your job to talk about the North Star incessantly and make it real. The daily stand-ups, the weekly meetings, board meetings, these are all fantastic opportunities to make the North Star real and tangible to everybody. So don't stop here. Don't stop here, because you are now on the road to getting a really good North Star metric. But remember that a great North Star metric sits within a clearly articulated product strategy. Product strategy is a horrific suitcase word. It means different things to different people. So what I've tried to do is define what it is. So I've put together a product strategy canvas, which breaks things down from vision to company goals, to North Star metric, to value prop, to the other key metrics you need. And this is an exercise that I love doing with teams where we sit together and we start to map out in the space of a couple of hours what our product strategy is. It gives unprecedented level of clarity. So I've got some examples which you'll be able to grab later. One of the questions that comes up a lot is OKRs. How do these two things sit together? So I don't think you have to have OKRs. I think they can be useful, but they're not by no means absolutely necessary. If you have OKRs, they're probably something like this. You have a 12 to 24 month horizon with several company objectives. I filled out the sales one here, hit a target, build some pipeline, achieve some inbound lead gen goals. You've got your objective and key result. You then have over here your 90-day horizon. So you've got the immediate things our teams need to work on. And this is common with goal setting. You look at the end goal where we're trying to get to, and then your job as the leader is to set a very clear horizon of this is the next thing we've got to get to. This is the next hill we've got to climb. The North Star metric sits in between these two. Because remember, the North Star metric tells us how we're going to hit our goals. It's part of the strategy. It's part of the how. Strategy is the how. The North Star metric is how are we going to achieve that revenue? Should the salespeople achieve it by just getting on the phone to anybody who will possibly buy our product and selling it to them? Or if it's retained users, should the salespeople chat to the product people? And should we say, okay, well, what do we know about our best users? Who are the people who really love our product? Who are the users that retain the best? So these differences, this makes the difference between Groupon and Netflix. This is the difference between a pop like this that crashes and something where you create sustained growth that compounds on itself and grows over time. It's all about delivering a high quality product. So that is what I wanted to run through with you today. I've got some good time for questions, which is always good to know. I'm going to launch just a quick poll to get a sense for how much interest there is in finding out a little bit more. I do office hours on Fridays where we can deep dive a little bit on what this could look like for your organization. And if you are interested in it, then definitely grab that link and book some time with me to talk. So with that in mind, I'll leave that open. I'm going to leave this link up so you've got that. Happy to take any questions that are going around now for the next 10 minutes or so. To ask a question, by the way, you can drop it in chat. You can also just unmute and talk. Anyone got anything they want to chat through? Yeah, no worries, Karen. I did say it would be 45 minutes. So. Cool. Well, I'll hang around for a couple of minutes if anyone's got any questions that come up, and by all means, get in touch. Oh, I saw Nick. Fantastic. Physical product. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I do, because what we did at CloudMade was heavily physical in that we had to be embedded in a car in order to deliver any value. So we were effectively hamstrung by the roadmaps of a partner. So that is why we ended up. That's why we ended up setting a North Star metric that was for the buyer, which is quite a controversial thing to do, to say we're trying to deliver value to the buyer. We're measuring our value delivery to the buyer, but that was all we could do. So if you're delivering a physical product, which I think, Nick, remembering the kind of thing you're in, you think you have some quite long sales cycles as well. However, the other thing I wanted to say was the DTC brand, where we had digitally returning customers. That's how we got around that problem. We were selling this kind of consumer packaged good product. We're saying, well, is the strategy to sell that product or is it to do something else? So kind of by lining up, what is the goal that you have? What are you really trying to achieve? And how will you know? How will that delight users? That's how you're going to get the answer. Okay, Chris, do I have a good approach to North Star metrics where buyer retention is important, but the user is on a one-time transaction? Interesting. I mean, the approach is definitely the same one, because this is the approach that I use again and again. It would be a case of figuring out what's more important, or what's the relative importance of buyer? So I'd want to look at things like, is it a buyer user? So is the buyer also using, or are they purely buying? When the buyer's a user, it gets a lot easier because we can have a delight metric for them. When the buyer is a buyer and the user's a user, I'm always going to skew more to the user. I'd want to look at things like, how is value delivered to the buyer, and probably break out the value propositions for the user and the buyer and look at how they're connected. So does the buyer get value from good things happening to the user, or is the buyer operating in a more passive sense? To what extent is the buyer a buyer who has like a value they're trying to deliver to themselves, or are they a procurer who's procuring for somebody else? So I'd look at those questions, and I think getting 2 value props painted for each of those groups would be the way to figure that one out. Julia, my question is how to navigate the conversation about North Star goals with a client. Okay, so is this like in a consulting context? You might, when you think they might benefit from it, but at the same time, you don't want to be intrusive. Yeah. Maybe using similar techniques to today that I've used, you know, starting to talk a little bit about where are they seeing successes, where are they seeing pain points. You know, so I'd always try and marry it with, you know, what is the dissatisfaction the client has today? Are there areas which they're not happy with? Are they growing fast enough? Do they have enough alignment? Even things like, is their staff retention good? And then look at the vision. So you first look at dissatisfaction with today, look at a vision for how you can fix it. Go, you know what? There are some techniques that we can learn from big tech or startups or whatever, where they set these metrics that are very customer delight focused. Maybe in the client, there's someone who's really, who is a sort of sponsor or an internal supporter for the idea of delighting customers who could be brought along as well. Then you look at the first steps, a very concrete, this is what you need to do. This is your first step to take. All we need to do is a 1-hour workshop where we'll get some ideas and I'll throw them back to you and you can tell me if you like that. So it sounds like there's a bit of an organizational change here because maybe these are big enterprises. So it's the usual process of organizational change. I was going to say unfortunately, but if you're consulting, then it's probably fortunately because you can sell lots of people to do the change. Cool. That is everything for now then. Oh, Ram, we have a number of paid seats. Yeah. Yeah, is that okay? So and Ram, is that it's B2B to some kind of a user, is it?
That's just great. So we're in B2B space. It's a self-servicing SaaS platform at Make. As you said, you know, my ambition is ARR, but we don't want to give the revenue as perspective to our team. Then we will look at what is the alternative way to do this. Then we will come up with the number of active seats. The back way forward, conversion, team doing the sales would also be involved, and also the customer success team and the support team would also be involved. So we thought that is the right method. Early stage of defining, but I want to take your thoughts.
A little hard to hear you, broke up a little bit for me at least, but I think I got the sense of it, that it sounds like it's a bit of a compromise. We are trying to compromise between things. I think number of paid seats is probably a pretty direct proxy for MRR. And the challenge here is you're risking that mouse, the sort of Facebook mouse problem, right? Where you don't know what's going on under the iceberg. So what you're missing here is this measure of, are our number of paid seats going up because we're spending loads on marketing? Is it going because our salespeople are doing an amazing job, or are people loving the product? And the problem is people have got to love the product. Like you can have a product that is great, that is poorly sold, that is, doing okay. If you have a sucky product that isn't retaining, you can have the very best salespeople and they're ultimately going to fail. So I'd maybe redirect attention a little bit more onto retention or to a measure of quality. What it also really does is, salespeople want to be successful like all of us, right? The thing that screws up the relationship between sales and product is misaligned incentives, where you have product managers who are incentivized on quality and retention, and you have salespeople who are just incentivized on bring anybody in the funnel, get your quarterly numbers. There needs to be a join in the middle where we say it's not about getting anybody in, especially early when you're pre-product market fit. It's about getting the right people in. We want the right customers, the ones who are going to love our product, who are going to engage with it, who are going to carry out the actions that we want. So yeah, that's what I'd look at. How can you make this more quality focused?
And one more question, if I may make. So we are transitioning from a startup to scale, as we speak. So we picked up this, this is the exercise that we need for January. So picked up this North Star, and then rather than a proxy, what we are defining is NSM at the department level, at the functional level, which is in line with the company's NSM.
Yeah, it's a little hard to hear you, Ram, but drop me an email on it because I'll follow up. It sounds like a bit more of a detailed discussion would be good. Like it's hard to go into, but yeah, we can, and then we can look at kind of how the org chart fits together. Okay, folks, thank you very much for sharing your Friday afternoon with me. Great to see you all over the world. I managed to catch some of your faces. Good to see people I haven't seen for ages. So hi, everyone, and then all the new faces as well. I will send out an email after this with the video, with links to the slides and follow-on info. Please do invite, forward to friends and colleagues. The more, the merrier. Have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for your time today, everyone. Bye-bye.